Hey there, everyone. I'm Metagross Freak, and I am an American socialist. Now, before you get into a big political debate, please hear me out. Many of the things that we take for granted in the United States are actually created using socialist and communist ideals. Things like national health care, equal rights, social security. And yet these kind of have been stolen by our country as hallmarks of democracy. Chances are, if you're a proud nationalist, you probably have the ideal or idea in your mind that socialism and communism are synonymous with evil and all the things that we find in our enemies, when in reality we shouldn't. If you go to other nations of the world, nations like, you know, Canada or Mexico or Australia or, India, they don't have that same view. It's only because America is the strongest capitalist nation. Even if you go to other capitalist nations like the United Kingdom, they're even actually more socialist than we are. And that's because Americans have a demonized opinion of socialism and communism that dates back to more than 100 years ago. So why do we have this? Well, we only have this demonized opinion of socialism and communism because capitalist giants like J.P. Morgan and Henry Ford made it so. Now, I know that's kind of a big claim. I mean, I just called, the J.P. Morgan the king of the American railroad, and Henry Ford the father of the assembly line enemies to communism and socialism. But it's true. And while we like to think about all the amazing things that the Industrial Revolution did for our nation, like the Transcontinental Railroad, it came at the price of immense suffering for the average American. If you do a little research into labor practices, labor was horrible for the average American. It was only people who were rich, people who were able to afford the luxuries in life, the capitalists, that life was that ideal that we like to imagine. A lot of the early workers' unions were socialist and communist. They supported Americans in these lower classes and tried to fight for these rights. In fact, there even were socialist and communist parties that were fairly successful. In fact, in one presidential election, the Socialist Party nominee won a total of 3% of the votes. Now, I know you may not think that this is a very large percent, but compared to, Democrats and Republicans, all the other parties mean nothing. So the fact that in an official presidential election with electoral votes, a socialist nominee had 3% is huge. And we will never see that in today because we have this demonized view of communism and socialism. And here's why. The workers' unions who supported these Americans scared the industrialists because people like, Morgan, they pampered the government. They were just like, hey, government, you want some money? Here's your money. And they were afraid because it doesn't matter how strong of a company you have, if all of your workers don't want to work, you can't make money. And they were afraid because if enough people fought for their rights, their workers would be gone, their money wouldn't be made, and slowly they would trickle down the road. And so, as a result, many of these fathers of industry colluded. They convinced, as a whole, the national government to create propaganda that demonized socialism and communism. You can easily look it up. That built up the idea that capitalism was the American way. It was the right way. It was the way that was, true and on the right and was basically It basically tried to push that capitalism was holy and that socialism and communism were demonic. There's a great political poster of there's a great political poster of Vladimir, not Putin, but Vladimir Lenin, and it's his face, but it's tainted red, for lack of a better term, with horns, and saying, this is the enemy, and it's a perfect picture of him. There's no doubt about it that it is him. We rarely learn about this in schools, but tens of thousands of Americans nationwide were abused, arrested, and even killed for defending their socialist beliefs after America basically went on a crusade to kick out the commies. It wasn't until the Cold War that we had nations like Germany and mostly Russia and its ally at the time, Cuba, that socialism became associated with an international enemy. Beforehand, it had all been in our own grasp. Look up if you really want to, because it's fascinating. Anti-socialist, anti-communist propaganda, and you'll see it's not just other nations; it's Americans. I really do urge you to take a look because it's a very dark part of America's history that's also fascinating because if it were not for big capitalist industrialist giants, maybe America could be a little bit different. Maybe it could be a nicer place. I don't know. But take a look and tell me what you think. I'm Metagross Freak, and this is just me spitting out some knowledge in hopes that you may be able to have better understanding of the world we live in. Thank you.